All right, welcome back to Crestview Leads, where I, Tim Bolduc, get an opportunity to sit down with people in the community, people who have had some influence in my life in the area of leadership. And we talk about all kinds of topics related to just the act of leading and or following. And so today, I've got a very special guest with me, Miss Wendy Neel. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
So we'll see if that's true
Yeah.
after a little while, yeah. So Wendy and I go back a little ways, not too far. Actually, we've known each other about 5 years, 4 or 5 years, go to church together. Our families, our friends, we go to dinner and that kind of stuff. And so, Wendy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I am a wife, a mom,
Right.
first, and I pastor a church alongside my husband.
Right.
We launched a church here in Crestview a couple years ago.
Big bald guy we had on here once
Yep,
already.
he's been
Yeah.
here. Yes, I understand why he's here. I'm kind of still trying to figure out how I'm here.
Yeah.
But we've lived in Crestview, I guess, about 7 or 8 years now.
Right.
And what else?
So so before this, you did, you guys were private business a little bit. Yeah, Wendy's Kitchen.
Yes.
So tell us
we've
about
been
that.
in ministry about 7 years.
Okay.
Before that, when I met my husband, he already was an entrepreneur. He started very young, and we were in the mortgage industry for a while, but I ended up going to nursing school when the mortgage industry fell apart. So I'm a nurse.
Right.
I'm a registered nurse.
Nice.
Did
Did you ever have to nurse people? Did you work in the nursing field?
I did. Yeah. I worked in a hospital. I was a labor and delivery nurse.
Come on now, that makes sense. I
So
can see that.
when we moved to Florida, I had 2 young kids and went to clinic nursing and was not super fulfilled doing that.
What is clinic nursing?
So I worked at a dermatology clinic.
Okay.
One of the things I loved about nursing.
So it's uppity nursing?
Yeah, but not nursing. So that's how Wendy's Kitchen came about. I was trying to get you there, but I realized that was a long story. But one of the things I loved about nursing was the autonomy, making decisions, taking care of my patient, critical thinking. And clinic nursing doesn't leave, I don't want to say that in every field.
No, I got you.
What I was doing,
Makes
there
sense.
wasn't a lot of that.
Right.
And I missed it. And just probably being married to my husband more than anything else just taught me to find problems and create solutions.
Yeah.
And
We talked about that actually on here.
oh, really?
Yeah, that entrepreneurs, the goal of an entrepreneur is to identify a problem and then identify and create solutions for those problems. And so,
Which is an addicting thing. Like you can't stop doing that, I think. And so in anything, and so kind of found that and started a restaurant in Destin.
Very cool.
To fulfill a need we found. And because I wasn't really fulfilled at work anymore.
Sure. So then went from that, did the restaurant business for a little while, snow cones or something?
Yeah.
Y'all had snow cone
We
business?
did that too. Yeah. I
Little
was
bit of
part of
that.
the restaurant. Sure.
And then you moved into ministry is what ended up happening. And so very, very cool. So we, like I said at the beginning of this show, I try to bring people on here that have had influence in my life. And so what I like to do, because I think a lot of these times, these leadership podcasts, they pick a principle and they just talk about it. And they don't necessarily cover like how, the attributes of a leader present themselves in all different forms. And one of the things that for me is so cool when I look at you and the leader, it's, I asked you, would you be on the podcast? And you said, well, it's a leadership podcast. What would why do you want me on there? Right.
Yes.
That was kind
exactly
of
what I said. Yes.
Yeah. Makes sense for Josh to be on there, but why would you have
I
me
support
on?
leaders well. I don't know if I'm.
Well, but there, there's some truth to that. And so honestly, what I was thinking of, when I thought about it, I thought, man, those and anybody who is out front, Josh as a pastor, lead pastor is out front. I'm out front, because of the job that I have. Any of us that are out front with any measure of success have actually really strong people behind us that make sure that we do that, right? And so that's one of the ways I know Josh, I love him to death, but I also know that Josh without Wendy is chaos.
Yeah.
And Wendy by herself might be chaos.
For sure.
For sure. So like, what I thought we'd talk about today a little bit is like, because all the critical thinking that you learned in the nursing school and all that stuff, when you're currently at the church, you're in a support role, right? So you tell us some of what you do there.
I like to tell what everyone else does and then say I do the rest of it. I won't do that this time. I oversee everything administrative pretty much of the church and like operations of the church.
Right. All the finances.
Yeah, finances, kind of staff things, making sure. I like to say Josh casts vision and I help make it happen.
Oh, I love that.
I don't know if there's
good.
a like principle behind that. But and I don't know that I enjoy administration as much as I feel like I do it well.
Yeah, so you're the point at which vision meets execution?
Yeah, I like that. That sounds much better.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So let's talk about that. That's cool because it's kind of an undervalued, or not necessarily undervalued, but I mean, it's an under-discussed topic.
Sure, kind of behind the scenes a little bit.
Yeah.
And there's ways that my role is in front of people. Like I pastor the women of our church or, ways like that. And I think those are areas of leadership where I just mostly recognize where I need help. Like I'm not good at this. So I need to find people that are good at this. But I would say that Josh, like I said, Josh casts vision. He steers the ship and it shows us the direction it's going to go. And then I figure out what has to be done in all the different aspects of it to make sure we're going that way.
One of the things that we did at the church that we do also at the city of Crestview is the Working Genius study. And so for those of you who don't know, The Working Genius is a book written by a guy named Patrick Lencioni, and he actually breaks down the basically it's the 6 parts of any particular project. So all the way from what he refers to as ideation to execution. So it's the idea that comes up and then it basically breaks it into 6 parts. And so we did that study. And it's called the widget, and it does from the widget is wonder, which is all the questions that you ask, and then it's invention, it's coming up with the solution, and then it's discernment or making the decisions, and then it's galvanizing, and then enablement and tenacity. So how you get things done. So one of the things we just left a leadership training, and you were talking about the fact that your 2 are discernment and tenacity. So basically, Wendy likes to make decisions and get them done.
Yes.
Right. So in the role that you're in, how does that? So you work with big vision guy.
Yes.
How does that impact?
We're both decision makers, which is really interesting. I think. But yeah. So when he, casts the vision, I pretty quickly get to this is what we need to do.
Right.
Maybe I've learned that maybe that's not great.
Yeah.
But I'll figure out, okay, this is what we need to do. And then I love, I write a box for everything.
Right. Right. How many check boxes did you have for this podcast?
Yeah. Just I think showing up for this one because I knew my friend well enough to know we'd figure it out.
There's going to be no script.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think was the biggest challenge from going? So I think that's probably why you liked nursing so much, because you talked about like in nursing, you get presented with a problem, you have adequate amount of training, right? So you do all of this training, you're equipped, you're prepared to answer whatever demand comes. And then you get presented with it, you get to make a decision on it, and then you execute whatever that decision is, right? Yeah. And so that fits right within your Working Genius.
Come up with a plan.
Yeah. Come up with a plan, execute the plan,
yep.
Right? There's not a whole bunch of nonsense, all that questions was beforehand. How does that translate to the job that you do right now?
Ooh, that's a great question. How it should or how it does. I think that I'm able to see, I'm also very critical. I say 99 things can go right and I'm going to find the one thing that can go wrong. And I'm saying that now to say typically what it is okay, to get this done, this is what we need to do. Here's the checklist. Yeah. Who needs to do it? Figure that out. But then also, how can we get better at those things? Okay, where did this meet I like to go back and say, did this meet that?
The expectation.
Yeah, this expectation. And are we doing what we're trying to do?
Right. But now you have to do it. So in working in the body of a church, you do all of that with
volunteers.
That's
right.
And so listen, I have a hard enough time getting people to get on board or do what I want them to do when they kind of have to, right? Yeah. So how do you, especially somebody who likes to make the decision and get it done, how do you get people who don't have to be there to be there?
I think inspiring people is the biggest part of it. And Josh is great at that as a galvanizer. He's really great at that. I think sometimes, again, behind the scenes, us talking about how, though, do we effectively cast that vision for people for the role that they fulfill in that. I don't know if there's a way to talk about this without me saying that, obviously, I think that because I always will say I'm not creative. I'm not creative in finding a way, but I was I believe I was created by someone.
No, I agree.
Who created me in his image, and he's creative. So there's ways I'm creative, but maybe not in the ways that I think of as being creative. So finding creative ways that is going to meet like if I'm asking a volunteer to do a specific task, how do I make that vision real to them and how it applies to the part of the piece that they carry?
Yeah, we talk a lot of times in here about, or I do, about how everything has to be personal, right? And so one of the things, the biggest challenges I think for leaders, whether it's even in the volunteer side or in the regular work side, is connecting people to the overall purpose of the function of what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And so I had an opportunity to do some strategic planning for one of the sales teams for one of the automotive sales places here in town. And one of the things I wanted to help it was the marketing team. Right. And so they were getting bogged down in the idea of, I got to meet numbers and numbers and numbers. And so instead of I spent the whole day with them, and instead of trying to get them to buy into, ways that they could execute their mission so that the salespeople, because it was just marketing. So they had to bring in leads. They couldn't control who called. They couldn't control whether or not they bought. They had to hand the lead off to the salesperson, but their measure of success was in how many deals got closed, not as much how many leads came in. And so they got real frustrated with it. Well, one of the things we talked about, or that I spent the whole day trying to do, was forget all of that. Connect them to the fact that if they do their job well, then somebody's going to bring in their kid that's 16 years old, and they're going to buy their first car, and they're going to get their first piece of accomplishment, and then they're going to learn responsibility. And then from that, they can go get a job, and then they can become supportive. It's this idea that, sometimes we get so tied up in the function of what we do that we lose the sight of the big, big purpose, right? And so I would imagine in the church, it's a little easier to say there's a purpose, but also if if you got to go weed eat somebody's yard, or because that's some of the stuff that the church does, right? And so how do you get that,
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the ways that, obviously loving people well is from the start to the finish, but ultimately, again, with the church, that idea, like what you just said, weed eating someone's yard, it's easier to cast that vision, I think, as that, though.
Right.
Like, hey, we're loving people ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, and so those, what I meant to say though is those things are easy to connect to vision. The harder part, I guess, would be when you stuff a bag for Mother's Day, or you decorate for.
And someone might not see that end goal, just like what you were talking about. The marketers, they don't get to see the kid go to college.
Right. So how do you get them to see it?
Yeah, and being able to connect that probably is sharing those stories, letting them see, hey, this is the end goal. This is what it's going to do. This is how it's going to help us accomplish the vision. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to make it more general than church, and that's hard.
That's right.
But being able to say, hey, this task that you're doing that feels just like a task is actually going to be received by the person that you're making it for as love, that will help them feel loved, which is true that they're loved, but not just by us, but ultimately by
the person who put the nuts and bolts together.
Right.
So in that same vein, one of the other things that you do for us is you sit on the housing authority board, right? And we had Cecil Williams in here. He did a podcast with us. We just released not too long ago. Good times. Cecil's a great guy. But so like, you've got kids at home. You got 3 kids at home. So you got football players and band singers or chorus people, and then a littler one, and church and all that. Why on earth would you do the housing board?
Oh gosh, that's kind of in the same reason the church came from.
Sure.
We love the community and the people of the community, and so this was a fun opportunity for me to be able to be a part of something that is separate from the church, but able to still affect people that we want to feel loved, like that, and in ways of decision making, with the potential to like change someone's life in a different way. Maybe not as much in an eternal way, but in an everyday life kind of way.
Yeah, it's a very practical, function, and so I think sometimes we kind of lose sight of that, like that's the job that the housing authority does, is that it provides for healthy, clean, safe housing, right? And so the board itself is the one who has to make. And you guys have, so here it was I don't want to say stagnant, but I am going to say stagnant because I can, because it's my show and I can do what I want. So it was stagnant for a long time. There wasn't a whole lot of things going on. And now you guys are doing all of this crazy stuff where you're getting an opportunity to execute that same thing where you see a solution, implement a solution, and then go get it done. What are some of those things, some of those projects? So you guys are buying some land, and what else? Do you know?
Yeah. And right now, going back and making the current housing places better. Rev is really doing a lot of things, able to allocate money that's kind of just been sitting there to be able to go in. I mean, it's little things, and it's actually that helps it go right into what I do in my job.
Right.
Little things. Everyone's getting a new refrigerator,
Yeah.
that make it a place that they're proud to call home. Like, so a little thing that has a big impact, but going and looking at all of the housing.
Yeah. So when your job, and this is something we find a lot of times, it would be the same thing on the nursing side too. So when your job is constantly giving of yourself to other people, how do you stay charged up? What do you do to do that?
I love people. I love to be around people.
Yeah.
And seeing people get that end goal of feeling loved and cared for, like, fires me up. Having conversation, I can talk. We laughed before we sat down. Like, there's not going to be any
lack of words.
My husband's the opposite of me. He likes to kind of get alone and recharge, and but I like to be around people. But seeing people be fulfilled in whatever way that is, whether it's, hey, they're walking and they're calling and they're seeing what they were created to do happen, and they feel good because of that, or even seeing people whose lives are changed through the housing authority that way, like seeing that people care for them, because I do think that's something. I'm newer to the housing board. I guess it's been, I don't know, a year and a half or so that I've sat on that board, but I think people are feeling cared for and seen. Our church has a very outreach
focus,
focused vision, and we get a lot of opportunities to see people be like the end user, if you will, get affected by the love that someone else gave something, and we get to go be a part of that and see that that joy on a child's face or something like this. So I feel like I have a job that allows for me to get to see that quite a bit
all the time.
Yeah.
Right. No, and then even on the volunteer side, it's the same.
Yes, because then the volunteers are fulfilled that happening. You see yourself giving to something greater than yourself and doing something, that isn't your job to do. So I would say that's one way that makes leading volunteers easy. Yeah. They recognize I'm doing something that's not my job to do. I'm not getting a paycheck for being here. It actually, I feel like, makes it more fulfilling when they can see those.
So how do you, we talked about this a little bit earlier today in the training class, and so I think it'd be a great topic for this, because for me, again, the idea, the concept of leading just volunteers blows my mind, right? Like, because how do you get them where you need to get them? How do you get them focused? So let's talk just a little bit about, like, how do you keep, everybody comes to a group that if they're going to volunteer, everybody comes to the organization to volunteer with some idea of what they want to accomplish, right? Sure. Everybody has great ideas. So the church's thing is you got a ton of outreach that we like to do. Well, how do you sort through all of the different ideas and try to keep the focus, right, with those volunteers without hurting their feelings and without getting them to leave, because you got to have them, right? So how do you do that? Like with us, I can do some corrective action, give them a plan, and hey, you got to get tightened up or else. But you can't or else, because you need them because they're volunteering. So what do you guys do to do that?
I would say there's multiple things. We are trying to make sure, look at everything. Hey, does it accomplish the vision? And everything that every volunteer opportunity, and this was a struggle for us at first, I'll tell you, because we had a pretty broad thing out there. We love Crestview. We want to bring hope to Crestview.
Right.
But
seems like somebody said we should set some goals so that we don't just try to bring hope to all of Crestview.
Yes, probably they did, and I couldn't understand.
I can't remember who that guy was.
Yeah, I don't know, but he was probably pretty smart. But looking back and I say, okay, is this part of the actual vision? Yeah. These ideas, and if not, hey, I actually had a phone call from one of our volunteers recently, and was telling me about a problem, and it's hard for me not to say, oh yeah, that's a problem I could probably figure out how to fix.
Right.
But saying, but wait, is this?
That's that discernment in you.
Yeah. like, oh, this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
But figuring out, is this for us to do? And if it is, okay, how we'll make that. But if not, hey, if that's something that you're passionate about, then maybe that is something that you're being called to do. But one of the harder things is saying, but no, that's not what Hope City's called to do right now.
Sure.
And
plus one of the things I like that they do is that we don't duplicate services, right? So one of the things that you'll see a lot of times in these volunteer organizations or these charitable organizations in general, whether it's church or not, is that the target audience can all be very similar. And so then what happens is or we see where they're duplicating the service over and over and over again, right? So you got 10 people trying to feed the homeless and 10 people handing out tents and 10 people. Is it you or is it Josh or who is it that keeps that group or you guys from doing the same exact thing?
Well, what we do try to do is there someone else already doing this? Is there someone else that's doing it well? And if there's someone else out there in the area doing it well, can we just get behind them? So sometimes it's that we bring them more hands. You know what I'm saying? Like ways to do that. Is that where you're going with that?
Yeah. But because it's
like
always
partnerships.
It's always been interesting to me how much people don't like to do it that way because they either want the credit or they want to do the easy.
Yeah, I don't know what the reason is. I mean, I think us not having a facility, that's another unique thing about our church. We don't have a facility, which ties our hands in some ways, but it's also making us be a little bit more creative. Of, hey, wait, is there someone else that we can join that's already doing this? And we can just like make their effort a little bit stronger by bringing more people, more things to that.
So a couple of questions. We're going to be running out of time here pretty quick. It's been fun talking to you, but I want to ask you some real specific leadership stuff, see if I can stump you a little bit. So in the, moving from nursing into nonprofit or church type business, what is the hardest transition what has been the hardest transition for you in your approach to either leadership or fulfilling your responsibilities, or what's the hardest part?
I've just thought of three.
I'll take three. Go.
Okay. Number one, you mentioned volunteers instead of like the outcome, the measuring of outcomes is different when you're looking at an internal thing versus hey, did this wound get better? Right. So the measuring of outcomes being different, and then so trying to determine your effectiveness. There's a lot of, if I'm going to use church words that we say, we sow a lot of seed that we don't get to see harvest. Right. But then even as you look at, go ahead.
Yeah, which that idea translates across, right?
Okay.
So it's a term that we use, comes from the Bible, sowing seeds, but the reality of it is that's what we do, right? So today I taught a class at the Crestview Chamber, and really all I was doing was planting a whole bunch of ideas in people, and whether those ideas grow into something bigger, it's the same. Right. And so
you're not going to necessarily get to see the effectiveness of what you did today.
And so our job is to go ahead and do that planning, right? So if we have experience, if we have knowledge, if we have an understanding, our job is to share that, and then whether it grows or not is kind of up to whether it gets watered. And
right. So that's one, and I would say, and then going from a world where there is, like you mentioned, corrective action if you don't versus keeping volunteers inspired and motivated. And I would say one of my weaknesses, I think our greatest strengths and our greatest weaknesses can be the same thing sometimes.
Okay.
So because I tend to I'll empower someone to do something and give them all the tools that they need or whatever. And then if that's successful, it's great. If it's not, well, it still has to get done.
Right.
And so then being able to trust to empower that person again or someone else again in that same way.
I got you.
Dealing with volunteers versus, hey, no, you're getting paid to do this. You're going to do
right, because you kind of have to figure out how to take your pool of volunteers and then connect them with their skills to the task that has to be done.
Right.
It's a very, and it's one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on here is because I just was like looking at the overall operation and thinking, man, how it takes a very unique skill set to get those people to get, because you only get what you get, right? People that volunteer are the only ones you get. It's not like you go farm out for them.
Right.
You're not hiring, so you're not taking resumes necessarily. It's figuring out how to connect those people to some kind of purpose so that they can feel fulfilled at the same time actually fulfilling the mission.
Well, and actually realizing, I'm going to say the discipline. I don't know if that's the right word. The discipline of myself. There's a lot of it I can do. Like I have the capacity. Oh, I already know how to do this. I could just do it myself. That's my problem most of the time. Yeah.
Like,
and I know the level of excellence that I require out of myself or that I want to see out of myself. But now I need to realize that, like, recognizing that my role, though, isn't, hey, Wendy, can you do these 10 tasks? Yeah. No, it's can you help someone else fulfill their purpose by giving them the opportunity? Yeah. You know, train them, giving whatever they need. And then how can you encourage them if they do fall short of the mark? I mean, it sounds horrible, but like maybe the excellent standard that I've set, if they do fall short, inspiring them and helping them see it in a way of, you know, encouraging them and empowering them to do it better or to a different standard.
Very, very cool. So listen, we're about out of time, believe it or not.
So I have a lot of words.
It's almost been our entire time. So I like to ask a question. I want to ask you a question that I ask everybody that comes on here. Is, if I remember, I think there's one I forgot. But I would like for you to think of a leader that you've worked for or been engaged with in some way.
Sure.
A leader in your life that emulated some characteristics of a leader that that carried out the characteristics of a leader that you want to emulate. And then why? So who is it and why? Why were they good leaders, and what do you want to be like them? How do you want to be like them?
Okay. So I grew up in the church, volunteered in the church my whole life. I really haven't been much of seasons that I haven't. But my first actual job in a church where I got a paycheck from a church, the pastor that I worked for was in Panama City Beach, actually. His name is Wayne Asprodidis. And he, as a leader, like I knew the things that he was like technically good at, like his job he was really good at. But then I would watch him do what I just said, like love someone well enough that he would allow them to do it, even if like, oh gosh, well, he could have done a better job than that. But he was just a great leader. He, you knew working for him that he actually cared more about you than what you did. Like I knew my role was important in the organization. He let me know that, but he also let me know that he cared about me and my family more than, so just loving people. I mean,
putting the people ahead of the production.
People first. I think that's how you say it.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it that way because that's how I say it. One of the things I see you do all the time that is very cool to me. Again, it's one of the reasons that inspired me to bring you on here. Is like I'll see you in the middle of whatever your guys are trying to accomplish, whether it's handing out backpacks or on a Sunday morning or something. And because of my proximity, I'll know all the chaos that's going on behind it. But then watch you walk around, love on people. I've always I'm not that guy. I'm not very good at that, right? I wear more of my frustrations on my sleeve. And so real quick, if you could give me one piece of advice on how I could stay happy as I engaged in people when things are blowing up behind me, what would you advise on that?
I don't even know that.
I didn't warn you of this one.
No, and I don't know that I think I do that well. So thank you for saying that. But recognizing, I mean, it's my role first is as a wife.
Right.
Josh's wife is what I am before my job.
Very cool.
But part of being Josh's wife is I'm a pastor's wife. So like I do fulfill a role at the church. I have a role at the church, but I recognize that I'm a pastor's wife first. So I say that to say, recognizing that no matter what the task list is that I have to do or how many things are going wrong, to that person, I need to make sure that I'm pastoring them well, loving them well, and that I see them. So just stopping and I have a good team. You have a good team.
Yeah, for sure.
Knowing you have a good team, those things are going to get taken care of, and just recognizing that, like, in that moment, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming and joining us, sitting down with us. We'll get you back on here. Maybe next time what we'll talk about is like, because you mentioned a couple of different times about being Josh's wife or whatever, but being that on the backside, the support of the person who's out in front a lot is kind of a cool thing. Maybe we'll get you and Kim on here to talk about it.
That would be fun. Let's do that.
Good times. But anyway, so thank you so much for watching the podcast. Like it, subscribe it. It's on all the different platforms, from Podbean to Spotify, all of them. Check us out on YouTube. And Crestview, we'll see you again. And this is why Crestview leads.